Hi there. Today we are going to be talking about reasons we would have a fire, and then based on those reasons, is there a type of fire we can actually build that would match those reasons? So let's get right into it. As you can probably imagine, there are some simple and obvious reasons that you would have a fire. One of them being heat. So if you needed to keep warm, if you had a shelter that you built near the fire and you wanted to heat that shelter, you could do that. If you needed to dry wet clothing or wet shoes or something like that, heat, right? Obvious, fire produces heat. So it's one of the pieces of the fire tetrahedron is heat. So you could build a fire to produce heat. Do all fires produce heat? Yeah. But there are some styles of building a campfire that might be better suited if you needed to stay warm or dry things off. The next one is another pretty obvious one, would be light. If you needed to build a fire to light up an area. If you needed to, and this kind of includes everything visual, right? So if you needed to light up an area, if you needed to like scare away like animals or predators or other things that go bump in the night, or if you needed to create a signal. If it was dark out and you needed something big and bright so people could see it from far away. Or the opposite of that, what if it was during the daytime? People aren't going to see a fire very well, but if you build a nice good fire and then put the right things in it to create a lot of smoke, that could be a visual signal during the day. So light, survival, signal, that kind of stuff. The next one is another obvious one. I bet you if I asked you to tell me different reasons you'd have a fire, these are the three you'd come up with. So far we have heat, light, and then the next one is cooking. So if you are cooking things, there might be a fire that it's better for. There are things that you could cook over the fire that might require some different types of fires. But you know, grilling out or heating up something, or however you're going to be making a meal or cooking something, which could be a meal or a snack, there's certain fires you could do for that. And for the last one, it's one you all know, but you didn't know that it probably had a fancy word for it. And the last reason to build a fire would be something called aesthetics. Aesthetics, Brett? Aesthetics. Aesthetics? Can you say that word again? Because it's a weird word. Aesthetics, yeah. So it's A-E-S-T-H-E-T-I-C-S. Aesthetics. And aesthetics just means like it looks good, it feels fun, like you're not really heating anything up, you're not cooking, it's not for light, it's just because. And most campfires probably that you've been part of probably fall into that category. It seems to be like when you build a fire, everyone gathers. Imagine if we had a fire pit at school and just one day randomly at recess, Brett went out there and started building a fire. Don't you think everybody at recess would just gather at that fire? They probably would. It's just people like to gather at a fire, and that's where you can sing songs and hang out, play games, and do that kind of stuff. So aesthetics is the last one. So again, we have heat, light, cooking, and aesthetics. Those are the four reasons that you would build a campfire. So let's get right into building a fire. I'm gonna go a little bit out of order with stuff, but you'll see why I'm gonna do that. So the first fire, you see that I already have all of my tinder, all of my kindling, and I've got a couple big chunks of fuel. Since we're not actually going to be lighting it today, that'll be next class, I don't need the fuel because the fuel is to keep it going. This is to get it going, and this is to start it. So you can see where the fuel would go, and I'll kind of show you a little bit. But I'm going to start off with a fire called the lean-to, okay? The lean-to fire, I'm going to start off with some big pieces of fuel, and I'm going to take some other fuel, and I'm going to kind of build like a tall little like wall here almost, and it's okay if it's wobbly. So I've got a nice big tall wall there. And then I might take some kindling of a medium size, something, and I'm just going to give it some stability right now. Notice that I'm leaning this wood on that wall just to kind of keep it still right there. All right. And some of you may have heard of a lean-to when we're talking about like maybe building a shelter out in the woods or something like that. So I'm going to take a bunch of my tinder, like a fistful right now. And what do you think? Just change this up a tiny bit. I might lay this one down underneath here. And there's no perfect way to build a fire. It's all like practice and what seems to work for you. Is I just knock all that down. And that is a-okay that I did that. So I just build it back up, right? No big deal. No big deal whatsoever. Cool. All right, so nice. I lean all that tinder just like that. And then I can start taking a whole bunch of kindling. And then I can start taking kindling of all different sizes. You see thin stuff and thicker stuff in there. And again, I'm gonna start leaning it over like so. And I could just keep going and leaning all this stuff like this. And eventually I could take more fuel, the big stuff, and I could lean that on here as well. Now here's why I would build the lean-to fire. This one is a good one for warmth, mostly for warmth. This wall that I built on this side is exactly the reason for warmth. When I get this fire going, I could stand up and be on this side of the fire and be like, I don't really feel much heat. This is, ooh, I'm still cold over here. This wall is doing two things. It's blocking the heat from going this way, but it's also reflecting the heat to go back out this way. So all of the heat from this fire is going to be deflected out in this direction. So if I was sitting over here, anywhere on this side of the fire, this would be a nice little warm area, or I could put stuff out here to dry. And in fact, I'm actually wasting my fire energy by letting it go that way if my shelter is this way, or if all the people in my group are sitting on this side, or if I really just want to dry stuff, I have all the heat over here in this direction. I also built the lean-to because, or I built it first, I should say, because every fire that I build a lean-to fire first to start it. And I'll get back to that in the next class as to why. So lean-to is good for heat. That's also good for light. I wouldn't really be cooking on a lean-to fire. That's not really good fire for that. So now I'm going to take my fire apart. Right? Normally you don't take fires apart. Usually you burn them. So take my kindling out. Try to save my tinder as much as I can. I'll just leave it there because I'm going to use it again. All right, so I got some fuel. I'll put that off to the side here. All right. So the next one is a fire that probably everyone's like, oh, it's a bonfire. It's not really a bonfire, but it is a teepee. And when we do a teepee, teepees can be complicated to get them built at first. I'm actually looking for a particular piece of kindling that I thought would be good to start a teepee with. I can't seem to find it, so that's okay. I often will start a teepee with a stick in the ground, and then what I'll do is try to find some other sticks that maybe have like little hooks on them, so that I can start to build up like this, and you can probably see what's starting to happen here as I'm kind of building a frame here so that I have sticks of all different sizes. Right now I'm just kind of doing some kindling, but now I can start on my frame. I can start leaning other kindling up against it. I can start using some bigger pieces, etc. And it's all kind of like leaning together. And then underneath it, I can start bringing in some tinder. I can start bringing in some more kindling, right? And you can start to see how this fire is coming together here. And when I light this, think about the shape of the fire. It's going to be centered right here. So this fire is good for a lot of different reasons. Number one, it's good for heat. It's going to throw a lot of heat out. Everyone can get warm around a teepee fire. If I keep going building this style, This is going to be a big, tall flame. This is good for light. This is probably the best fire to produce a lot of light. And then another reason to build this one, this is a good aesthetics fire as well. Like any fire is a good aesthetics fire. But like usually if you're going to gather at a fire, you want it to be like, oh, it looks like a campfire. Woo, teepee. But the other one that this is good for is cooking. And when I say cooking, anything you want a constant hot spot right here, this is where the flame would be, right? So if you needed to boil water, if you needed to make a soup or a stew, this would be a good fire to do that because all the heat's right here. So if you had put some wood like in the ground and then you put another piece of wood across it, and you could hang a pot of water or something right above it, this would be a good fire for that, all right? So that is the teepee. So now I take the tinder away, and I take all of this kindling away, put that back down here. All right, last fire that I'm going to teach you. This next one is, I always like to do it this way, so I'll just do it the normal way I know how. This one is the quintessential cooking fire. When I say that, the word quintessential means basic, most often used, etc. And this one, maybe I don't want that piece. Yeah, I'll just do it this way. So this one is sometimes called the crisscross fire or a log cabin fire, depending on how you build it, right? So I'm gonna put my tinder in here. Brett always said he starts with a lean-to most of the time. And then what I start doing is I start taking my kindling, right? And I start doing this, but I'm starting to make like a ladder of kindling going across it. And then I start doing it again in another layer going the opposite direction. And I'm just crisscrossing all of my stuff. And I'm using some different sizes here and there. You know, some people like to use all the small stuff and then build up, build up, build up. I like to mix it up so it has different burn points. So different points that these things burn up and turn to ash. And there's no rule that says, well, you gotta go 4 across and then 3 across and then 5. No, you're just getting them across here. And what's happening with this particular fire is that as all of this stuff burns, right? You notice I used 2 pieces of fuel as the base. I could have gone another couple pieces of fuel, but that's okay. As this stuff burns, all of the wood is gonna turn to coals and ash, and it's gonna fall down to the bottom, and it's gonna make this nice little square of really hot coals. And coals are the hottest part of the fire. So if I have a nice even bed of coals, what I just made is basically a grill, right? So if you've ever seen someone cook on a grill, sometimes they use charcoal if it's a charcoal grill. Coals, where do you think that charcoal comes from? Well, they mass produce them, Brett. Yeah, that is true. But we're making charcoal right here when we burn this wood. And if you use a gas grill, it's just heat underneath at a pretty constant temperature, and that's what we're doing over here. So if I let this burn for a while and let all of this stuff fall down, well, eventually I could take like a metal grate and put it across here, and now I could start grilling up like hamburgers and hot dogs. I could do veggie burgers. I could do grilled vegetables. Basically anything that I would do on a grill, I could do here. And you can start even, you could do a baked potato if you wrap it in foil. You could put it actually in on the coals and that would bake. You could do baked apples. You could do banana boats. You could do so many different outdoor cooking kind of things. If you know what kind of fire to make. And this is probably the fire you'd build the most often because it produces those nice hot coals. So I'm going to leave this one here for setup. So let's just do a quick review. We talked about reasons to have a fire. Heat. All of these fires produce heat depending on what kind of heat you need. The lean-to reflects it a little bit better. The teepee throws it everywhere. This one produces nice coals. This is a good fire. This one's easy to build and probably the most sturdy, so I often build this one. If I need it for light, teepee is going to be the way to go, but you could also build a log cabin up pretty tall and high. If you're gonna use a fire for multiple reasons, like cooking and light and gap, this is probably the one to go with. If you need a fire for cooking, depending on what you're cooking, if you need coals at all, this is the one to use for sure. And for aesthetics, really you could use any of them. Like I said, I'm someone who spends a lot of time in the outdoors and made a career out of it. I take youth outside a lot. This is the fire I build nearly all of the time. But I always start my fire with the lean-to, and that's my teaser. I will explain that one next time, okay? Cool. Folks, I'll catch you in the next lesson. Thanks for watching my video.